Oh my gosh, guys, I am super, super excited about this next guest. Sylvia Acevedo is a good friend of mine. I've known her for a long, long time, but she and I have not seen each other in forever. So I'm super excited she stopped by the Ripple Effect podcast today. Sylvia, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Great. And Steve, it's so great to see you. I love what you've done with the ripple effect.
Oh, thank you so much. Coming from you, that means so much to me. I appreciate that.
Oh, I remember when you were starting out, right?
Yeah.
And you took this idea and you let the ripples go. And look at it's been so successful. And
Uh,
I'm just so proud of you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm proud of you too. I mean, look at all the things that you've done since we first met. I am all about the origin story, so that might be a good place to start. I'd love to have my audience know a little bit more about you, kind of, where you've been on your journey, because it's a very interesting one, and then ultimately, kind of what you're doing today. So, could you give us a little bit of your background?
Oh, absolutely. And it's kind of interesting that you bring that up, the origin story, because especially for kids who I want to motivate and inspire to do STEM, science,
Yep.
technology, engineering, math, I ended up writing a middle school memoir called Path to the Stars. And even the reason I thought of middle school is it's like when an elevator door is closing, sometimes you stick your hand in there to keep the doors from closing.
Yep.
Middle school is like that last time that you can kind of get to the students. And, if they have even some math, science, technology, they have so many more life choices than if
Yes.
they don't. And it's a lot easier. And so I really wanted to inspire them. So I wrote my book, Path to the Stars, about, answering the question. So how did a kid from rural dirt roads in Las Cruces, New Mexico, be able to become, rocket scientist, get an engineering master's degree from Stanford, become a White House commissioner, a tech exec, an author, and, be the CEO of Girl Scouts and now a corporate board director, right?
Yep. Yep.
And I really wanted to inspire them that, yeah, there's a lot of challenges along the road, which I had a lot of challenges, but developing the persistence and resilience. And, Steve, something you and I share is I think we learned at an early age how to create opportunity.
Yep.
And when you know how to create opportunity, you have so many more choices in life. And, and then we both have that persistence and resilience that allows us to be successful entrepreneurs as well. So, when I think about my life journey and starting and, my family, we really were challenged with money. I mean, sometimes we had to go live with family members because we didn't have any money. We didn't even have a home. And so that, those formative experiences really shaped the way I thought about stuff. But I was really grateful that certain programs like Head Start, the Girl Scouts, they taught me some life-changing behaviors. And so Head Start really catalyzed that love of learning and reading. And, I had a teacher who noticed I was really bad at crafts. And so she said, instead of doing crafts at show and tell, why don't you share with us a book? And, we're talking Dick and Jane,
Yeah. Yeah.
the trials and tribulations of them. And so I would read the book and I would share that with my class, and that really got me to really love, being in front of people and speaking, that confidence, and also love of reading. And then in Girl Scouts, again, my family didn't really have money, and luckily we had a troop leader who said, "Don't worry, you'll sell cookies to pay for all your activities." And because of that, I learned how to create opportunity, because if you're raised in poverty or near poverty like I was, you're not surrounded by people who know how to create opportunity. And so what that troop leader did is she taught me how to create opportunity. She said, "What do you want to do? What are your dreams? What do you want to achieve?" And I'd say, "Well,
Yep.
I want to do all these great things that, the camping, the park outings, all of the things." And she's like, "Okay, so that means you have to sell this many boxes." And I was like, "Oh my God, that's a lot of boxes." But in
Especially in rural Las Cruces, New Mexico. I mean, let's
no
be honest.
kidding. Yeah, no kidding. So we were selling for a certain number of weeks. So she broke down the goal into, by that number. And so it was like, you have to sell this many per week. But then if you want to sell 6 days a week, it's only this many boxes a day. And I thought I could do that.
Yeah.
And then she said, if you run into problems, you can always ask for help. And that sounds simple, but that really is the key to creating opportunity. You
Yes.
name your goal, your dream, break it down into smaller, achievable steps. And when you run into trouble, ask for help.
That's amazing. Well, and talk about a ripple that she created for you in terms of that life lesson, that mindset, where it's, taken to you, taken you, and obviously the imprint that's left on your life and your career, because clearly you have done that every step of the way, right? So, how did you get from rural Las Cruces, New Mexico, to the college environment? Because I know you went to New Mexico State, right, initially. Yep.
Right.
So talk about that a little bit, because I know my listeners will definitely be interested in that origin aspect.
Oh, absolutely. So, one of the things that also selling the Girl Scout cookies, it got me to love math.
Yeah.
And I realized that the more I did math, the better I got at it. And the better I got at it, the more I liked it. So it's that virtuous circle as a
Yep.
kid.
Yep.
And then the other thing that was really important was I also learned never walk away from a sale until you've heard no 3 times. And that was really important because the first time somebody said no, I remember standing there and you could have seen a cartoon thought bubble over my head.
Mhm.
Troop leader Mrs. Provine says, never leave the side of a sale until you've heard no 3 times.
What do I do next? Yeah.
I know. And so then you got to think about, so how do I turn this around into a yes? And then I asked, is there somebody else at the house that would want to buy some cookies? And she's like, no. And again, the woman's looking at me like, go away, little girl.
Yep.
And I'm
Yep.
thinking,
Yep.
what do we do next? And then I asked, is there anybody's day you would make if you bought some cookies? And she bought 1 box, probably to get rid of me. But it taught me persistence. It taught me resilience. It taught me about getting to a yes. So in elementary school, I began developing those muscles of how do you create opportunity, right? And also how do you get to a yes, which becomes really important. That matters because, in high school, I played percussion and I wanted, our band got brand new timbales, which weighed like 35 pounds. And back then I only weighed like 105, but I was first chair and I wanted to carry the timbales. And my band director said, no. And I said,
Ooh.
why not? And he said, because that's my first no. And I said, why not? And he said, because you're a girl. I'm like, that's not going to change. Why else not? And he said, because you're not strong enough. They're heavy. And I'm like, okay, that I can work on. And all summer long, I worked on getting strong. And so when fall started, I strapped those timbales on and I marched up and down the field in the hot New Mexico sun. And my band director
Ah,
said, people are going to get so mad at me because they're going to think I made the girl carry the heavy drums. They didn't know you wanted to carry them.
yep.
But that get to a yes. And then also I wanted to go to college and I wanted to study engineering because I really liked, especially industrial or systems engineering, which is you marry people, processes, and systems together. And I went into my guidance counselor and I was sitting there right outside her office and she looked at me and she said, why are you here? And I said, well, I signed up for college counseling. And she said, girls like you don't go to college. And okay, unfortunately, statistically, she was correct, but
Yeah.
that was the wrong thing for any educator to say to any
Sure.
kid. And what was that to me? By that point, I'm a senior in high school. By that point, it's my first no. I walk into her office and I sit down. She follows me and she goes, okay, what do you want to study? And I said, I want to be an engineer. And she laughed. And, so I went on and became an engineer and a rocket scientist. So those kinds of skills of learning how to get around that no to make it a yes, it was becoming so vital. And I was so grateful that I had those lessons. And I got to go to New Mexico State and I'm grateful for that. And from there, my first job out of college was at NASA's Jet Propulsion Labs in Pasadena. And I landed in what I call the equivalent of Christmas or major holidays
Uh-huh.
at NASA because one mission, Voyager 2, was passing a planet. And that's like high holidays at NASA
Yeah.
because, whoa, you get all these amazing images, all this telemetry, all this data coming back from that planet. And that's when I landed there. So I got to work on that mission. And so some of the iconic images you see of Jupiter to this day are from the Voyager 2 mission. And I remember sleeping in the cafeteria at JPL because, of course, we didn't all have our own modems and our own computers and our own phones that had the images. You'd have to go to work and see, those big screens. And then also every moment that the Voyager was passing was sending back data. And so you were trying to capture it as real time as possible. And then I also worked in another mission, which is Solar Probe. And some of the material that was needed to get close to the sun hadn't even been developed, like ceramics and some of the stuff.
Wow.
But it is right now on its way to the sun, and that's pretty cool. But after that, I got accepted to go to Stanford, and I got my master's in engineering, and then I landed right then in Silicon Valley. But here's also, Silicon Valley has a little bit of a challenge sometimes with women, especially
Yeah.
women in engineering and technology. So my persistence and resilience paid off, and I ended up getting a job at IBM, but in facilities engineering. And so that's kind of not the glamour engineering you think
Yeah.
of, but it got my foot in the door.
Sure.
And as you got to get in
What it
first.
takes. Yeah, you got to get in first.
And I got in, and I worked and I worked and worked, and found, actually created some kind of innovation in that area, which was, we're creating manufacturing facilities, and everybody sort of like did it the same way. And I learned something really important, and I learned to try to provide a plan that was what everybody expected, and then provide an alternate plan. And the first time I did that, the manufacturing chief said, well, let's try that. It seems kind of innovative. We did that, and production really increased.
Oh, wow.
As a result of that, IBM was creating a brand new 765,000 square foot state-of-the-art manufacturing facility, and I got tapped to do that. And so I was able to do some really cool stuff with that. With that, I was able to get into the IBM sales and marketing program, and then I got into sales and marketing, and right in the middle of Silicon Valley. So it was a great experience. I had to work my way in, but I did. And from there, I just had a really great technology career. And one of the things I noticed, Steve, too, is besides sales and marketing experience, which are really important, I realized I needed to have product experience, network experience. So I purposefully developed my career. So I went to Tandem Montgomery and Bass and did networking. I went to Apple, learned a whole lot about sales and marketing and international. Worked at Autodesk, learned a lot about software and, again, global marketing. Went to Dell, learned so much about how do you sell directly to the consumer and also to large businesses. And then I got the entrepreneurial bug, and me and 3 engineers started a company, and we were able to sell it. And then, Steve, I had choices. I could have gone back to technology, and I think that would have been really a great path too. But I wanted to do something to help others. And so I used my scaling and problem solving skills in helping kids in terms of how do you close the achievement gaps, and especially in STEM. And so I started to create educational grassroots campaigns that actually took me all over the country and landed me at the White House. To work underneath President Obama on an education commission. At the same time, I got tapped. Actually, Governor Ann Richards of Texas, she had nominated me for the Girl Scout board, and I got on the national board. And then the CEO before me left, and they asked me to step in, and I said, I'll just stay until you find somebody else. And they asked me to stay, and then I ended up staying for 4 years, and then it was time for a transition. And I really wanted to get back to technology, and so I'm very grateful for that, Steve. So I am now on 2 corporate boards in technology, both actually in semiconductors. One is Qualcomm, wireless 5G, and then the other one is Credo Semiconductor, which is everything wired, which is sort of the opposite of Qualcomm. And I'm also doing corporate speaking, and like I said, I wrote that book, and so it's great to sort of catch up with you that way.
Oh yeah, I mean, gosh, when do you sleep? That's what that whole career path just it's dizzying how amazing your opportunities are, and every single time I can imagine just knowing you like I do that you rippled your way to the next best opportunity, right? And just so many very interesting things to unpack there. But I mean, all the different approaches that you took. I mean, the thing going back to the plan, right? Have the plan everybody expected, but then have the alternate plan. How did you come up with something like that?
I think partly because I had just recently graduated from Stanford in engineering and had gotten some state-of-the-art classes. And then also I think people had kind of forgotten some basic human factors type of work as well. So I was able to bring that in because I realized they weren't factoring the workers as much. And these are the state-of-the-art production facilities where people are wearing those bunny gowns. You can only see their eyes. And, I think they'd forgotten to really include factoring them in. And when we did, by making adjustable workstations, making it easier for them to get in and out of those bunny uniforms, those, clean room suits and things like that, actually their production soared.
Yeah.
So, that was an important lesson, because I wondered why we hadn't been doing something like that before. So that's
Yeah.
why it started me. And that was a really great lesson for me, to always produce an alternate type of, proposal. That also worked for me when I was in corporate and enterprise sales, of responding to RFPs.
Really?
So everybody says, you've got to respond to the RFP exactly like the RFP. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, what if? And so that's what I did. In fact, I sold outside the United States the first fiber optic large networks, they're called FDDI networks, outside of the US. And it was because, the bid was only for a certain kind of Ethernet network. But I thought, well, imagine if they had this fiber network. So guess what? They wanted that bright, shiny network, right?
Yeah.
And I remember one of the competitors, he took me out for drinks afterwards. He goes, how did you know to do that? And I said, I didn't. I just thought, well, let's just give it a try. And so that, I think, when you think about your audience and people thinking about Ripple, you can try to Ripple in a kind of unusual way as well, or provide an alternative.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think that's a brilliant strategy, because what's the worst anybody can say is no, right? And here's what everybody expects you to present or do, and that's fine. I'll live up to those expectations. But then on the flip side of that, let me just show you some ideas that I was thinking about that might be interesting for you to consider. And right off the bat, you differentiate yourself as an out of the box thinker, which automatically differentiates you from everybody else that's responding to the regular RFPs like everybody else does. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, you're right. And also, I think sometimes people early in their career don't want to do things the way everyone wants them to do it.
Yeah.
And so they ignore responding the way they're supposed to respond or expected to respond, which doesn't do well for your career, because
No,
then they
it does
think
not.
you're too much of a wild duck. But
Yep.
if you respond how they expect you to respond, and you provide an alternative, then they see you, as you've mentioned, as really innovative, really a go-getter, etc.
Well, and like you said, as you tie that back to Ripple, like the ripple of connection, if you're doing it like everybody else does, then you're kind of like everybody else is in terms of how you're being received and perceived in the world. But if you are throwing out a little bit of a uniqueness and an alternative, and there's an opportunity for you to differentiate yourself, it pays off so big in life. I mean, I kind of remember back to when you and I first met, and I had read an article about you, and I'm just one to get to the point where it's like, life is too short not to reach out to people that you just find fascinating and interesting. And you were so amazing to me. You were just so incredible. You were giving me your time and your knowledge and your experience. And you never really at any point were like, okay, what's the angle? Why is this guy here? What's he want to sell me? What are we trying to do? And there wasn't anything. I just was like, I admired what you were doing in the world, and I could see what an impact you were making. And you were just so gracious. And sometimes people are afraid to do that. And if I hadn't done that, look, I would never have met you. And I consider myself so grateful that I did, because you are just such an inspiration to me.
Oh, thanks so much, Steve. Yeah, I remember, and yeah, you've always been a go-getter. And I've appreciated that. And I remember from the very beginning, you had your idea. And I thought, okay, you've got the persistence, the tenacity, the drive. I think you don't hear no 6 or 8 times, not just 3.
Maybe I could be a pest. Maybe, I don't know.
No,
I'm not
no, it's
sure.
not a pest. It's the resilience and persistence, which
I
is
agree.
fantastic, because you need that to be an entrepreneur. That's something people, need to know. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you've got to be able to just, move past the no's and figure how to turn these into yeses.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree. So let me ask you, what's the best piece of advice you think you've ever gotten, and who was it from?
Great question. Best piece of advice. You know what? This is an odd one, but it really was helpful. Here I was in IBM and Silicon Valley back in the day, and there really weren't people like me, especially in sales situations. And my boss turned to me and he said, like, Sylvia, they're going to look at you and they're like, we don't really know where you're from. So instead of just launching into the typical IBM sales spiel, you need to help them know a little bit about you. And I think they would be really surprised to learn that you were a rocket scientist working at NASA and that
Yeah.
graduated from Stanford with your master's in engineering. And so he said, figure out a way to bring that into the conversation in a way that isn't egotistical, but in a way helps people know a little bit of your backstory. And I'm really grateful that he did, because I can't tell you how many times people introduce me as, a rocket scientist or whatever. But it's a great icebreaker,
Yes, it
and
is.
and it isn't really just me talking about me a lot. It's just really quickly giving you some context of, why, I at that time knew a lot about what was going on in IBM Technologies because I was a rocket scientist and I got my master's from Stanford in engineering. So that was a really helpful piece of advice.
Well, and instantly it gives you there's that story hook. Everybody wants to know more. So like, how did you end up at IBM? Why did you leave NASA? And all of these different conversations, that oh, sorry, my Darth Vader just went off. I have a Darth Vader plug my son actually bought me for Christmas, and every time it hears a sharp click, it just goes off. So sorry about that. I'm going to re-ask that question,
Uh-huh.
or make restate that statement, which is it's amazing because when you actually allow people to get to know a little something about you, it's incredible how much more they want to know, and that's actually the secret to business, right? That's how people get to know one another. They want to know more about each other, and ultimately that's when they decide they want to do business with you. So I think that probably paid off in a major way.
Yeah, that was really helpful. Great piece of advice. So I was glad that he gave it to me. I think he was really smart to see that that was needed, and I was really grateful that he gave you that advice.
Well, I know you're very passionate about STEM. And so, what are you doing now to promote that in schools and to support that and get the business community behind it? Because I think it's so necessary. There's statistics. I know that you and I have a lot of the same passions about helping, especially girls, understand and realize their value and figuring out how to appreciate the opportunities that these types of career paths offer to them, but a lot of times they're in environments or they may be given bad advice along the way from student or counselors or maybe even teachers in some capacity that those opportunities aren't necessarily for them. So what do you say to those young people out there that are thinking, God, I'd really like to do that. I'd really like to follow a similar career path as Sylvia did, but what do I do?
Well, I'm probably going to go 35,000 foot, and then I'm going to go down into your question. So to maybe even go 50,000. My father was in the military, and I was born in Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota. And as a result, my parents had every tchotchke of Mount Rushmore. So seared into my brain from infancy is that Americana.
Yeah.
And also because my dad and all my brothers both were in the military, I have that sense of patriotism and love of nation. So then fast forward a lot of years, and then I'm in technology, and especially in the era in the 90s and in the aughts, I would see that several countries had a strategy. And, I'm thinking China, I'm thinking India,
Hmm.
you can also see Israel, and you can see Russia. But they thought, how can I make the top 1% or the top 10%, but even the top 1% of our nation English fluent and technology savvy, and create a pipeline of jobs from the United States to those countries? Well, no surprise, they did it, right?
Yeah.
Big percentage. And if you think about, if you have a billion people like China and India, and it's only one, you've got only, if it's only 10%, you're
Yeah.
still talking 100 million people, right?
Yeah.
If you
Yep.
say only 1% have the highest academic fluent English, you're still talking 10 million people. That's a lot of people per country
It
at
is.
least,
Yep.
right? And so, and then I saw them not only have that strategy, but I saw them start executing that strategy and more jobs going over there. And then I thought to myself, who's thinking about the American worker, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
who's thinking
Right.
about, people in the US? And I thought, wow, I was just really stymied by that. So then you fast forward, finished working in technology, working in education, because I think, gosh, to be globally competitive, you've got to have, the best educated workforce. And so then when I got to the Girl Scouts and I saw that, you have this national network of millions of girls,
Yeah.
and really we'd only thought about activating them with cookies. What if you activated them with STEM? And so
Yeah.
during my 4 years, it was creating STEM programming that provided at least 100, I think 126 badges just in STEM, which are coding, cybersecurity, automotive. I mean, just all sorts of design
Wow.
thinking, all sorts of great badges. I mean, I think in my last full year, 2019, over 1 million STEM badges were earned. And to me, that was back to that question of who's making sure that people in rural, kids in rural, urban, suburban communities are getting the hands-on STEM that they need to be able to compete and to help America
Yeah.
compete
Yeah.
in the workforce. So, I feel really strongly about that it's so important that we have a STEM educated workforce, because where the jobs can go anywhere in the world, you want to make sure that all Americans in rural, urban, and suburban communities have that chance
Yeah.
to be able to be developed to, the top of their potential. And, it's interesting. One of the things that we found in Girl Scouts is that we had to redo so much of the curriculum, which sort of gets to your question, your initial question, which is a lot of times the way STEM is taught is around, what interests boys,
Yeah.
and it's taught that way. And I know it's kind of difficult, but girls and boys do learn differently,
They do.
and
Yeah.
girls like to learn together. So we developed a lot of our programming that fostered that, and as a result, girls really enjoyed it. And an example I love to give is about how do you teach girls about network protocols and viruses and malware. And I'm talking 7 to 8-year-old girls,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Everybody's like, oh, because typically the way you teach it, you're talking about defending protocols and spyware and defenderware and
Yep.
all this kind of stuff. But instead, or you talk about network protocols, there's 7 layers and all this stuff. And at that time, a 7 or 8-year-old girl, she's going to be so bored. But what we did was we got girls to sit in a circle and talk. And it turns that 7 and 8-year-old girls like to sit in a circle and talk. And then we gave them a ball of yarn, and they threw the ball of yarn to each other as they spoke to another. And then within a minute or two, you would stop the
Yes.
activity, and you
Oh,
would
yeah.
show that the yarn had touched every girl, right? And so that is a physical network.
Yeah.
And then you could say, okay, one girl, Holly has a virus. Holly didn't talk to 3 of the girls, but she talked to this one girl who talked to all the other girls. So now you all have the virus. It was
Yeah.
like, oh, now we get it. So it's like,
Brilliant.
get the protocol to get that. And then they get interested. So to get girls or anyone who's not familiar with STEM, you first have to get them interested and then confident. And then once you have them interested and confident, like that exercise, then you work on the competence. But if you start at giving them something that they're not familiar with, like it's just the toy that their brothers use, then the girls are
Yep.
going to, no, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm interested and I'm not confident. So I'm not going to work on my confidence and my competence. So whereas boys, if you give them an activity that's been designed for them with something they're familiar, they're already interested, they're confident, and now you work on the competence. So by redoing the types of programs, it got girls really interested, and then they began providing their own amazing capabilities. I mean, I think in Iowa, some girls developed an alternative hand for kids who didn't have hands. I mean, it's just amazing.
Wow.
The work in cybersecurity was just really mind-blowing as well. I know some girls created really passionate around the earth and didn't like what was happening with styrofoam. And these girls in St. Louis figured out that you could make styrofoam a solvent glue, so you could reuse it instead of it going into the harmful, landfill.
Wow.
So I loved how they took the STEM learning and then applied it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that the fact that they can do that and they can look at it, like you said, now they're invested and now they really see the benefits of what they're learning and how they can apply it. And they have a voice and they can see the contribution that they're making, which is so critical. And I think a lot of my listeners, for those that have daughters out there that maybe haven't been, or maybe not necessarily thought of Girl Scouts as an opportunity, that's clearly a path that they could go. What maybe is one or two other suggestions you might have if you have someone that's listening that has a young daughter or even a teenage daughter, getting them motivated and excited about STEM?
Yeah, helping them understand how it makes a difference in the world. A lot of times STEM is taught about, okay, we're going to get into coding, right? Or war games. And I know sometimes girls are really interested in that. I know on the bell curve, I was on the far end. I like rockets. That was very atypical. But a lot of girls don't. And so figure out how to make it so that it's really relevant to them. Like, for example, in middle school, we were working with a partner and they wanted girls to learn about buoyancy and center of gravity. And so they thought you build a boat and you race a boat, and that's how you teach it. And we're like, no, no, no.
Yeah.
What do you want to teach? Buoyancy and center of gravity. And so what we did was we got girls to create a model of a dog, a corgi, because it's got a low center of gravity,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then that corgi had to float. And if the corgi didn't float upside right, your corgi drowned. Now, no middle school girl wants her dog to drown, right? And so they learn center of gravity, right, and buoyancy, but they do it in a way that's really interesting to them. And one of an impactful lesson I learned in cybersecurity. I was in the farmland in California, not in Silicon Valley, and this girl was telling me about how interested she was in cybersecurity, and she was earning her gold award on that. And she said, "I'm really concerned because tractors and combines don't even have a steering wheel anymore. They're all controlled by the Internet of Things." And she said, "My project is what happens to our food supply when the Internet of Things is hacked and our
Mm,
tractors and combines can't move." I was like, whoa,
that's
right?
huge. Yeah.
Was that? I know. I love that,
Yeah.
because then they saw an application that was real and relevant.
That's awesome. That's it. That's incredible. So since you stepped down as CEO
Yeah.
of Girl Scouts, which is, you did an amazing job. I was always trying to send you notes on LinkedIn every time I see you on Bloomberg, or I'd see you on a national television. You were on the morning shows a lot, which
I
is, I thought, so great. You
was.
brought so much visibility to Girl Scouts. They were so lucky to have you. But how different has your life shifted because of that? Are you still active and involved in Girl Scouts in terms of supporting them? Or are you involved in other avenues that are kind of helping in the STEM
Yeah,
arena?
I'm still, yeah, I get asked to speak to groups a lot in Girl Scouts, but I'm also really thinking of and working with organizations that are trying to get STEM, especially with COVID. That's really impacted a lot of
Yeah.
kids
Yeah.
and kids who didn't have access to a lot of great learning. They've fallen so far behind. So, one group I'm working with, they're creating short video vignettes that you can put on your phone or even through television, because some areas
Wow.
people are really, they don't have access to great Wi-Fi, but they may have a cable access or be able to watch television. And so they'll be able to get these small segments and snippets of how do you use everyday material to solve some STEM challenge. And that to me has been really, really heartwarming. And so we're working on getting that even spread to more people. And then also just talking about my book. It's been really amazing going and speaking, virtually to all these schools about the book and how impactful it's been, because I realize a lot of them don't know somebody who's been through that
Yeah.
and has been successful. So I think that's been something that has been really, really rewarding.
Oh, that's great. So, one of the things that you did when you were CEO of the Girl Scouts, I wrote you and told you about my COO for my software company, and his daughter is in Girl Scouts. And I said, "Hey, would you just do me a favor and just write her a note?" And you wrote her a note and actually sent her a badge because she had accomplished something at the time that I didn't necessarily seek her permission to like say her name or put it out there, but she had done something that I thought was noteworthy. And because you and I were friends, I was like, "Hey, I just wanted you to know that she thinks I'm super cool because I know the CEO of Girl Scouts. You totally bought me all sorts of street cred with her, but you took the time, as busy as you were, to actually create a ripple for her." And it was like the greatest thing ever. It just made her day. She told everybody about it. It was so cool. But that's just the kind of person that you are. And I think those are the things, the opportunities that you're talking about, the things that you're doing, did as CEO of Girl Scouts, but you continue to do now for the education system, and to create some of this momentum around STEM. You're creating ripples like you have no idea. I mean, I think at the end of the day, you've had this amazing corporate career, but your legacy is so much bigger than just that.
Well, thank you very much. That's the kind of thing that you feel makes a big difference. I know that when I was in Austin, I learned that 20% of the kids in poor school and Title I schools needed glasses and didn't get glasses, and
Yeah.
they wouldn't get glasses. And a lot of it was because it was challenged to get to the place they needed to go to turn in their voucher, et cetera. So, but bottom line is, if you can't see and read, you're not going to learn.
That's right.
So we created, with a lot of great partners, a vision van program, and people volunteered, and the kids in all these schools, and I think like 11,000 glasses were made. It's one of the reasons I wear glasses.
Yeah.
Was you can be kind of, you can still be cool and wear glasses.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll tell you that some of my warmest memories are a kid putting on a pair of glasses and their face lighting up, because it was like, wow.
Now I can see. Yeah.
I have no comparison because their vision has never been corrected. And so there were so many of those experiences that I used to call them the leaves on the tree story,
Yep.
because everybody go, oh my God, there's those green things are actually leaves, So that made me feel really good. And I'll just tell you a couple more stories along that line that that impact hasn't left me. I flew into Kansas after an ice storm, and there was going to be a big STEM event. And this ice storm had stopped, so we decided to go have the event, but there was still a little ice around.
Yeah.
And that night, all these girls were doing all sorts of coding, robotics, all sorts of fun stuff. And this woman, she said, he drove 4 hours in an ice storm to get here. And I said, sir, Girl Scouts is all about safety, so really appreciate that. But he said, well, you don't know much about Kansas. And I said, right. And he said, our heyday was right after World War II, but we've lost all those jobs, and there's an opioid epidemic that has decimated.
Yeah.
It's decimated our communities. And so he said, what my daughter's learning in STEM, technology, and leadership is giving her a leg up on life. And he says it's more dangerous to stay home. Wow. And that, that really stuck with me.
Oh yeah, oh man, what a great story. Having just come back from Kansas, I understand. That's the impact that you can make in those communities is so critical and important. So but what a reaffirming way to say, hey, I was gonna risk life and limb to get here because I need to be here. That's amazing. Wow. So let me ask you another ripple oriented question. So who would you consider your greatest hero and why?
That's easy. George C. Marshall.
Yeah. Why? Okay. Tell us.
There's only been like maybe 2 times in history that people have come together and done a common good for others. And even though we know those examples exist, the Marshall Plan, we as humans don't do them. And I think what people didn't realize is that people just think, of course, after World War II, America would rebuild Europe. Actually, the sentiment was very much like, we're done with it. We're not going to spend money.
Yep.
George C. Marshall, he went all over the country barnstorming and made sure that, the businesses and the people realized that, if we rebuilt Europe, it would be good for the United States. It would be good for Europe, but good for the United States, and it would provide a peaceful outcome. And, if you think about it, he was right. And that's so hard for us to do. So he's my big role model.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, so what in your mindset, when you think of the ripple effect, what does the ripple actually mean to you?
You never know. I'm living, I have so many ripples coming back in my life, that you don't know what you're setting out. And especially if you do it, as you mentioned, when you and I first got together, you're doing it from, pure intent and goodness, right?
Yeah.
And those type of ripples tend to have, I think, a higher frequency, higher vibration level,
Yeah.
and they really do get through. But when I think about my life, there's so many great opportunities that happen for me now, but they happen because of what I did decades ago, right? Or, years ago. But the ripples keep happening. Or, I'll get asked to speak at a corporation because somebody, remembered me, and now they're in a position to like hire people, and they go, I remember listening to you when I was really young, and I've always admired you, and so now I'm going to hire you. So it's kind of, those types of things, those ripples come back, and it just makes you feel really, really good because you feel like you've made an impact.
Absolutely. I always tell people you never have any idea how deep and how far those ripples will travel, but they always do come back to you. You just have to be patient and aware that they eventually will. They just, the actions that you take, the impacts you make out there in the world, they do make a difference. And if you live your life without holding score and worrying about, getting paid back, but doing enough good things out there in the world, good things just tend to come back your way. So you're proof of that. I could talk to you for hours, but I know that you are super busy. I mean, you're doing so much right now. It just blows my mind. But I am so absolutely grateful that you came on the Ripple Effect podcast, because you are truly, when I think of people that have made an impact in my life, and even though we're not in the same town anymore, and I don't get to see you, and I can't give you a hug right now, you have made a huge difference in my life. I'm so grateful for our friendship, and I am so proud to know you.
Oh, Steve, it goes both ways. I always answer whenever you reach out, I answer
You
really as
do.
quickly as I can. I hold you in such high regard. And the fact that you're just so, you tenacious, you keep wanting to help people. You're always that kind of gracious person, but you're also a strategist. I think people don't realize, you're really a keen thinker, and you're very much a strategic thinker as well. And so
Wow.
I'm just grateful for what you've also put, the ripples you've unleashed in the world.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that more than you could ever know. I'm just, I hope to make as big an impact as you have in the world, and continue to do so. I just want to do my part, and, try and play catch up a little bit to you, because you're a rock star. So,
Oh, no,
well,
thank you. You've made the world a better place, Steve.
thank you. Thank you. You too. I feel 100% that way about you. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining the Ripple Effect podcast. I can't wait until we're going to definitely have to do this again. So we're going to have you back for sure. But I know everybody that's listening, Sylvia, actually, before I do that, tell everybody how they might stay in touch with you. How, are you on any social platforms people can follow
Yeah.
that you're up to?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I tend to Google very, very high. So
Yeah.
you can,
Yeah. Number
and,
one.
yeah, uh, you know, uh, if you're going for an easy read as an adult, Path to the Stars. It's a
Yeah.
middle school memoir. It's also available in Spanish. So if you want to work on your Spanish, you can read it in Spanish. But it's a great book for middle school kids, and also I have a lot of adult readers as well. So but on social media, mostly on Twitter, some on Instagram and LinkedIn.
Fantastic. And we'll put some links down in the show notes along with your bio. And I'm just so grateful you came on. Hopefully, maybe one of these days, being fellow New Mexicans, we can actually meet up in our home state and enjoy some green chili. So let's
My
make that a
favorite.
plan. Yes.
My favorite.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, Steve. Thanks so much.
All right. Take care. Ripple on.
Ripple on.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Oh, that was awesome.
Great. Great.
Yes. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh. You are just unbelievably awesome.
Oh, no, thanks. Hey, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for doing it. And I will let you know when we get it edited and get it out. But we certainly appreciate you doing it. And are you planning on coming back to Austin anytime soon?
Yeah, every time I put a plan in place, COVID changes
Yeah.
it.
Oh yeah. Has that
And
really impacted everything for you?
yeah, in terms of travel, and I'm a huge pickleball player now. I love pickleball,
Really?
and you've got a huge facility in South Austin now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I have a lot of friends that are addicted to pickleball in Austin that have invited me.
Oh yeah. Well, if you make it down here, let me know. I'll take you to dinner.
That sounds great, Steve. I
All
really look
right.
forward to it. Hey,
Thank
thanks so much. Have a
All
great
right.
day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye
Thanks.
bye.
Bye.